Moving on, let's now talk about the rest pattern and also rest parameters. And the rest pattern looks exactly like the spread operator. So it has the same syntax with the 3 dots, but it actually does the opposite of the spread operator. Now that doesn't seem to make much sense, right? But let me explain. So remember that we used the spread operator to build new arrays or to pass multiple values into a function. So those are the two use cases of the spread operator. And in both cases, we use the spread operator to expand an array into individual elements. Now the rest pattern uses the exact same syntax, however, to collect multiple elements and condense them into an array. So that's really the opposite of spread. The spread operator is to unpack an array, while rest is to pack elements into an array. And since that sounds really confusing, let's write some code. And let's start by exploring the use case of building arrays. So just to recap, in the last lecture, we used the spread array like this. So we wanted to create a new array based on an existing array. And so we use the spread operator to expand that. So here we are still using the spread syntax. And we know that this is the spread syntax because we are using it on the right-hand side of the assignment operator, so of the equal sign. So let me actually write that here. Spread, because on the right side of the assignment operator. However, we can also use it on the left-hand side of the assignment operator together with destructuring. So now we're mixing kind of everything together here, but bear with me here. So let's say that we are destructuring this array. So let me first write the array here, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so let's say I want to take the first element, store it in variable A, the second element to store in variable B, and now I can here use the rest pattern. So the same syntax, and now let's call this others. And so here it is the rest syntax because it's on the left-hand side of the assignment operator. First write that and then see the result, because on left side of the equal sign. And so now let's log A, B, and the others, whatever that's gonna be. And so 1, 2, and then basically the rest of the elements that we did not select into the A and the B variables. So what is happening here? Well, just like before, the first and the second elements become this first and second variables. But then here comes the rest pattern. And so it's called rest because it will take the rest of the elements, so the remaining elements of the array, and then put them into a new array. And in this case, we call this array others. So as I said in the beginning, the rest pattern basically collects the elements that are unused in the destructuring assignment. So let's see another example here. And this will show you that we can actually use the 3 dots on both sides of the assignment operator. So let's say that we have this array, which will be the entire menu. And so we already know how to build that using the spread operator. So we go to restaurant.mainMenu. So that's dot. So we take all the elements out of that array and put it into a new array. And then into this new array, we also put the starter menu. Okay, so this is going to be an array, a big array with all the entire menu. But now we can actually also use the rest pattern here. And so again, we do that here on the left-hand side while we are doing destructuring. So let's take a look here at the main menu. So let's say that we want to take the pizza and the risotto. Okay, So that's the first and the third. So let's create a variable called pizza. Then we can skip one variable, remember, so leaving a hole there in the destructuring assignment. Then let's call one variable risotto, and then simply put all the other food, well, into an array called other food. And now let's simply log everything here to the console. All right. So we get indeed the string pizza, the string risotto, and then all the rest of the elements that we didn't select previously into their own variables. And note here that the rest syntax collects all the array elements after the last variable. So in this case, here risotto. So it does not include any skipped elements. So it's really just the rest of the elements. And yeah, again, as I said, it does not include any skipped elements. And so for that reason, the rest pattern always must be the last in the destructuring assignment, because otherwise, how will JavaScript know until when it should collect the rest of the array, right? So for example, we could not do this. So the error message is actually very explicit. So the rest element must be the last element. All right. And also for the same reason, there can only ever be one rest in any destructuring assignment. Okay. And now let's do the same in objects, because it also works indeed in objects. So the difference then, of course, is that the remaining elements will be collected into a new object and not into a new array. So let's now work here with our opening hours. And let's say that we want to select only Saturday here. And then the rest should go into a new object, which are the weekdays. So Saturday is weekend, and Friday and Thursday are the weekdays. And so basically we want to create an object only with these two. So only for the weekdays. And now that is easy to do. All we need to do is to basically take out Saturday into its own variable, and then we simply collect the rest into a new object. And this we can call weekdays. Okay. And then here, of course, the object that we are destructuring. Dot opening hours. And now let's take a look at our weekdays here. And indeed, it is exactly what we were expecting. It is an object only containing Friday and Thursday. And again, that's because we already took Saturday into its own variable before. And so this then collected the rest of the properties into its own new object. Great. So now we know how the rest pattern works to collect elements in a destructuring assignment. And actually, let's write that here. So this whole first part is for destructuring. And then the second part will be about functions, basically. So remember that also for the spread operator, the second use case was to pass multiple arguments into a function all at the same time. So that's exactly what we did here in our real example with this ingredients array, right? So we had an array, and then we expanded all of these elements of the array to basically pass these elements then as individual arguments of the function. And so now, as you can guess, the rest operator can basically do the opposite. And so let's now write an example function for that. So I'm going to call it add. And so in a real adding function, we want to take an arbitrary amount of arguments and simply add all of them together, right? So function, and for now, let's just leave it like this. And so let me illustrate how we want to call this function actually. So we want to be able to do, for example, this 2 and 3. It should give us 5. But then we also might want to be able to do this 5 and 3 and 7 and 2, for example. So again, any arbitrary amount of arguments should work for this function. So something like this, for example. But of course, we're not going to specify like 7 arguments here, right? So how can we do that? Well, we will use the rest pattern. And in this case, it is actually called rest parameters. So let's use the rest syntax, and then let's call this argument numbers. And here, let's then log this numbers to the console. So this function is going to be called 3 times. And so we are expecting 3 results here. And what we see here is 3 arrays with all the arguments that we passed into the functions. But they are indeed arrays. And so now, once again, as I said in the beginning, the rest syntax is taking multiple numbers or multiple values and then packs them all into one array. So once more, it is doing the opposite of the spread operator. So with the spread operator, we expand. With the rest syntax, we compress. So here it's called rest arguments. Okay? And now we can write some simple logic here to actually add all the numbers together. I believe we already did that. So here is our sum variable that's going to be accumulating. Then let's write a simple for loop. And you could also do this here as a challenge if you wanted. But anyway, I will just do it right away. So we know that numbers is an array, and so we can take the length of that array and run this loop as long as the counter is below the length of the array. And in each iteration, we simply add the current number to the current sum value, basically. So I'm writing this really fast because we already did this before. All right. And so this should be nothing new at this point. And now to finish, we can log this sum to the console to get some results. And indeed, this here is now 5. And so this is at this point a working function which can accept any number of parameters. And hopefully you're not confused yet by this. And now I want to take it even to the next level. So let's create yet another array. Let's just call it X because it's not important. And I will put in numbers 23 and let's say 5 and 7. So now if we wanted to take these values here and call the add function with these 3 values, how would we do that? Well, simple enough. We simply use the spread operator. And that's it. And so this is exactly what we learned in the previous lecture. So we're taking all the numbers of the array and spreading them here. And so this would be the same as writing manually 23, 5, and 7. And so this is a good example of showing you how spread is the opposite of rest. Because after these numbers being spread here, they will then enter this add function here, and then they will immediately be collected into this numbers array by the rest parameters. Okay? So here we unpack the values, and here we pack them back again into an array. And you could actually be wondering why we are not simply writing an add function which takes an array as an argument, and then we don't need all of this. Well, it's way better to do it like this, because then the function can accept both an array, basically by doing this, and simply all the single values like this. And also it feels a little bit more natural to simply pass as many arguments as we want to add together into the function. So without having to deal with arrays if we don't want to. And so this rest parameters is something that you will see all the time in modern JavaScript code bases. Okay, and now just to finish this, let's actually use rest parameters in our restaurant example here, also to see some edge cases. So let's add yet another method here. And this time, the method is going to be about ordering pizza. So order pizza. And now pizzas need to have at least one ingredient, but the other ingredients are optional. And for this, REST parameters are perfect. So let's say main ingredient, and then the other ingredients. And so now this is going to work a little bit like this structuring again, where then this here basically will collect all of the rest of the arguments into an array. So let's see that. So main ingredient, and let's log the other ingredients. Okay, and so now let's order pizza. So restaurant.order pizza. And now here we specify our ingredients. So let's say mushrooms, onion, olives, and spinach. So nice vegetarian pizza right here. And so you see, we can specify as many arguments as we wanted. Let's save this. And you see down here immediately that we get mushrooms, which is this first ingredient here. And then we get an array of all the remaining ingredients that we passed in. And so this, of course, is the result of the rest arguments. So again, the first argument was stored into this main argument here. And then all the remaining arguments that were passed in were simply stored into this array by the rest parameter syntax. Okay. And of course, we could also simply define just one. So let's order now a pizza with only mushrooms. Then the remaining arguments here will simply be put in an empty array because, of course, there are none. And so there's nothing to collect into the array, but we still get an empty array that we can work with if we want. So in that function, we could now create some logic, like to create a string based on all of these ingredients, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But if you want to have some fun, then feel, of course, free to do that by yourself. Anyway, the takeaway from this example is that, once again, the rest parameters serves to collect all of the remaining, basically unused parameters that were not used in this parameter. All right, so let's recap after yet another quite long lecture here. So the spread and the rest syntax both look exactly the same, but they work in opposite ways depending on where they are used. So the spread operator is used where we would otherwise write values separated by a comma. On the other hand, the rest pattern is basically used where we would otherwise write variable names separated by commas. So again, the rest pattern can be used where we would write variable names separated by commas and not values separated by commas. So it's a subtle distinction, but this is how you know when and where to use spread and rest.